Let me just start, not with foreign policy, but with the fact that I am a departmental minister, but I'm also a member of the government. So it's important that I start, I think, from the overall aims of the government, and then explain how I think foreign policy fits into them. The new government's project is focused in three key areas, all of which, I believe, require an active foreign policy. First, our prosperity relies on a more open Britain, open to new investment and trade, to new people and ideas. In the 21st century, I think that successful countries of the world will be those that are most open in their social structures, more open in their political structures, above all, most open to the talent of individual citizens, whatever their background. Second, the Brown government's vision of how we build security for our country relies on tackling instability and injustice at home and abroad. It requires cooperation with countries on terrorism, migration and organised crime. It requires collective action on the great existential threats, from nuclear proliferation to climate change. And third, our mission to give power to people to shape their lives does depend on local accountability that successive statements in the House of Commons from domestic policy ministers have outlined over the last 3 weeks, but it also depends on global institutions, global agreements, and global links. The vision is summed up in the idea of Britain as a global hub. Just as the City of London acts as the centre of the global financial market, British cities and institutions and ideas can become the hubs for scientific, cultural, and political collaboration. But that vision needs to be delivered in different and new circumstances, and therefore needs new tools. And it's those circumstances and those tools that I want to address now. I think it's obvious that the environment for diplomacy has been affected by a series of shifts in the distribution of power at international level. When I was at university, it was still the case that people talked about, quote-unquote, balance of power as the basis for diplomacy. Today, the new diplomacy needs to reflect big changes in the distribution of power. I think there are 4 really important points that strike me, anyway. First, for much of the last century, our security concerns were primarily about excessive and expansionist state power, threatening their own systems or citizens or neighbouring countries. Today, some of the greatest threats are likely to emerge in countries where state power is too weak, not too strong. The implication, I think, is clear. Building the capacity of states must go hand in hand with building democratic accountability. While we've actually seen a substantial reduction in the size of conventional and nuclear arsenals since the end of the Cold War, it's striking that the sense of insecurity felt by our citizens hasn't reflected that diminution in the size of conventional and nuclear arsenals. That sense of insecurity has probably increased. Across the world, people are demanding more power for themselves, but our task is to make this a force for progress, for coordination, for connection, not a force for destruction. Second shift in the distribution of power is that over the next 2 decades, with the growing strength of China and India, we're likely to see political, economic and military power more geographically dispersed than it has been since the rise to global dominance of the European empires in the 19th century. This makes our most important bilateral relationship with the United States more, not less, important. It makes the case for our leading role in the European Union and NATO more obvious than ever. It makes our membership of the Security Council, and therefore our work with Russia and China, more vital than ever. It makes our determination as a government to champion UN reform, with Security Council membership for a larger group of countries, more relevant than ever. And it actually offers a new basis for a vibrant Commonwealth as a unique network of nations. Third, I think it's also obvious that there's a mismatch between national power and some important global problems. The risk of financial crises, climate change, and health pandemics cannot be mitigated by individual countries alone. They require collective action on a regional and global scale. Managing the risks from globalization and maximising the benefits requires institutional innovation. And I think the development of the EU, sometimes a halting and faltering development, but the development nonetheless reflects this. Fourth, the power to coordinate at scale, which historically has done by hierarchies in bureaucracies or through price mechanisms in markets, is now also being done without the helping hand of the state or the invisible hand of the market, but instead, as Rickon said, through the technology that enables networks to challenge the power of traditional incumbents, economically and politically. In benign forms, you can see it with Linux challenging Microsoft Windows, Wikipedia challenging Encyclopedia Britannica, or political campaigns like Make Poverty History, Stop Climate Chaos, or Move On. Less welcome, obviously, is that these networks are not only available to forces that want to connect people and work together to solve common problems. Also present is the increasing capacity of extremists and terrorists to coordinate their disparate activities without the vulnerability of a single point of control. The power of technology to connect people across the world needs to be put to strategic good use. Now, what do these four shifts in the distribution of power mean? I think they mean the following: that we need to change the way we analyze threats and exploit opportunities. Our security is threatened by terrorist networks using the freedom of an open society, but our security can be enhanced by the spread of democracy and by good governance. Our prosperity is threatened by climate change, but can be enhanced by free trade. Our sense of powerlessness is exacerbated by the weaknesses of international institutions, but can be diminished by the potential of new networks. In other words, there are new sources of insecurity in the modern world, but also new resources, the flip side of these dangerous forces, new resources for prosperity. And this has implications not just for foreign policy priorities, but how we go about pursuing them. If we as a country are to continue to be a force for good, we need to be smart about how and when we combine the soft power of ideas and influence and the harder power of economic and military incentives and interventions. The first source of power set out by the Prime Minister is winning what he calls the battle of ideas. I want to try and unpack that a bit. What do we mean by the battle of ideas? I think first we mean that we have to be clear about our objectives. Our objective is not domination. It is not to force others to live as we do. In a world as diverse and complex as ours, it is to establish, on however thin a basis, a set of rights and responsibilities by which we can live together in all our complexity and all our diversity. Our aim must be to galvanize all the resources of moderation to block the path of radical extremism. Nowhere is this more the case than in the Middle East and in the drive for a two-state solution there, a point I'll return to later. We need also to be clear, not just about objectives, but about values. For example, the declaration at the World Summit in 2005 that the international community has a quote-unquote responsibility to protect populations from genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crimes, and crimes against humanity marks a vital new stage in the debate about the relationship between human rights and national sovereignty. So we're right, in my view, to work urgently to avoid a repeat of the 1990s catastrophe in the Balkans by backing the Ahtisaari plan for Kosovo strongly, which I discussed with Foreign Minister Steinmeier and Foreign Minister Kushner yesterday. The battle of ideas also means being clear about facts and evidence, such as whether it's in our financial self-interest to tackle climate change. I believe it is, in every country's financial self-interest to tackle the threat of climate change. The Stern Review showed that the UK can have a major impact on debates across the globe by reframing climate change as an economic as well as an environmental issue. So I think that my predecessor, Margaret Beckett, was profoundly right to take the debate for the first time about climate change into the Security Council, to reflect the importance of climate change to international security. And I think we need to find similar ways of leading thought in other areas, whether this is concrete and immediate challenges, such as nuclear disarmament and proliferation, or longer-term challenges, such as the future of global institutions.